Starting the stream finally around roughly the time of day when I would prefer to be streaming, which is right around when my lunch hour would supposed to have been. But, you know, try as you might to make things happen a certain way. It doesn't always work out that way, and that's fine. You just gotta go with the flow and roll with the punches. We are going to try and wrap up day 30 of Odinmade Hero here. There's a good amount of coding left to work through, so I'm going to go ahead and let Casey move through discovering why this bug that he had just discovered when we wrapped up yesterday with trying to move across tile maps, why this is happening. Because everything we've done up to this point is to get this feature to work. So we can scroll off of one tile map with this little yellow rectangle here and wind up on the new tile map. So let's see where this goes. Jumping right into the code here.
But we're still a little bit buggy. All right, so let's fix that. And then once we fix that, we actually only have one other thing to do before we can actually walk between tile maps. And because all we have to do to walk between tile maps after that is actually look to see when when our test point, our new player location, moves off of the screen and switch to a new tile map. All right, so what's our bug? What have we got?
What is our bug indeed? Hey, Devil. Yeah, early stream. This is actually a better time for me to try and stream, if I can manage it. It just doesn't always work out that way because of meetings and other things going on. Hey, Evo1 Build. Good morning. Finally got to catch one of your streams. Yeah, it's also my hope that, you know, by streaming at different times of day sometimes, that people who normally wouldn't be able to make it and tune in live would be able to make it. But, you know, somewhere in this 5-hour time slot is when I aim to stream, between noon Pacific and 5 p.m. Pacific, or 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Eastern. Figure that out based on wherever you're at in your neck of the woods. But yeah, just try and keep it somewhat consistent within that range. Probably won't venture too far outside of it unless, you know, I'm not going to say that I won't ever stream pretty late if the opportunity arises, you know, after the kids go to bed, or pretty early before the kids have all woken up. Those kinds of streams might happen from time to time, but this is generally where I'll try and slot things in at.
There, what's going on? So what we want to do now is we'd like to go ahead and say we'd like to see what happens in these cases. Of course, I also should make sure that our tile maps are actually set up so that there actually is an empty spot there that you can actually walk to. So let's double check and make sure that's true. So we essentially have tiles. Our tile map excuse me, is set up so that we've got 0, 0, and 0, 1. So this is, oh, you know what? I think I set them up backwards. I did. This is yet another reason why you know, all these crazy, that the C syntax for this and not being XY is really annoying, and it leads to a lot of errors. That's why I pretty much always pack stuff myself. As you've been seeing, I constantly move to packing things myself because this syntax drives me nuts. I always want to put the X first and the Y second because X and Y go in that order in math, and you've been drilled into it. It's been drilled into you so much that it's hard to just like switch around. And I believe that this is actually wrong. So let's double check. So I wrote these as if it was X and Y, I believe, right? Because that's XX, that's XY, 0, 0, and this was XY. This was supposed to be below this one, right? And you can see it was. And so that's not what happened here. What happened here is we did it the other way around. So it's actually that is actually the way that I wrote them. So that,
yeah, so I mentioned this, I don't know, it must have been yesterday because that's when we were working on all of this, or maybe not. Maybe we had already declared all of these. It's really hard to keep the days straight past a certain point. But I think I commented on this where I was basically saying, you know, the way that we are ordering the tiles such that we think this is how they should be laid out in the world is kind of swapped dimensionally from how we'll actually relate them to each other in the way it's laid out in memory. So basically this has to be swapped with this, right? And I think that might have been the bug all by itself. Or maybe I actually meant to do it this way. I think that way works too. But yeah, he changes the assignment, not the he changes the tile map that he's assigning, not the order in which he's assigning them out of the 2D array of tile maps. Hopefully I said that right. It's kind of tedious to follow that in your head. Let's see. I actually said your name right. Well, I try to. You know, some people, like, there's this really helpful person in chat yesterday who was catching some mistakes I was making, and I was really grateful to them for that. But I could not, like, their name wasn't even a username. It was just a bunch of consonants. And I actually decided, after looking at their name long enough, it just kind of looks like an intrinsic to me. You know, it was like RCRN, you know, STN or something like that. And it just kind of looked like a compiler intrinsic to me. So I think if he shows up again, I'm going to refer to him as Mr. Intrinsic, just to, you know, make that simpler. But yeah, if you have a name that's legible, I'll try and pronounce it right. This is really fancy coding. I only know simple stuff like making a website. Well, you know, yeah, like Devil said, a website is fancy coding to some people. Also, like, web dev can get pretty complicated. I've been doing it full time for work for going on 8 years now. And sometimes web dev can get pretty darn complicated, more complicated than it needs to be even. But if you're just talking about like writing up some HTML or Markdown that gets turned into HTML, that sort of thing, that can be simple, but there's an elegance to its simplicity that I think is actually kind of beautiful in a sense. XY width and height is always error prone. Yeah, it's really hard to build an intuition to map the way your brain thinks about the math into the way things are actually laid out in memory. So, you know, but by doing it over and over again through repetition, and that's really what I'm trying to have this stream be all about, is like the continual self-improvement, you know, never allowing myself to become stale. And I think that's something that is sorely missing, not just in the domain of programming, but in culture and civilization everywhere at this point. Like, we have a lot of people that do a lot of stuff online, right? And postulate about the right way to do things. And the problem with that is not that it's not possible to sometimes abstract things meaningfully with the way that you talk about them. But at the end of the day, you have to actually go and do something at some point. You have to actually go and do some work. And the only way to truly learn in a manner that makes you as capable as you can be is by doing the thing, not watching people talk about doing the thing or watching people speculate about how to do the thing the right way. It's one of those things where I think that our language that we use, and I mean literally like the words that we write down and speak out of our mouths, we put a little bit too much faith in their ability to draw a circle around things and say, this is the way things are. When the truth is, you can only get so far with language and the language that you use. At some point, you have to go and do the thing. And that's how you actually build an understanding. Because so much of the way the world works is actually based on an intuitive understanding of what you have, of how things work. It's not, you know, I read this document and it told me everything I needed to know about the thing. I read this book and now I know all the things about the thing. It's not that that isn't useful. It's just language is only useful to a certain extent. We have all of these other ways which we can't even wrap words around. And I'm probably doing a bad job of expressing this, but if you spend any time reading into and listening to experts about experts on how our brains work and how language works and all these things, they talk about this sort of thing a lot, where you simply cannot distill everything down into a group of discrete parts, which makes the whole comprehensive. And the example that I hear used a lot is like, think about a song. You can break a song down into all of the notes and all of the instruments that comprise the song. And you can say, you know, here's the, the percussion, here's the melody, the harmony, the rhythm, all this stuff, all of these individual parts. But that does not describe the whole of what a song evokes from you sensation-wise. Like, what are the emotions it pulls out of you? That's what it means to be human, right? Is like the fact that it's actually, you put all that together and it's driving at something like through you that you can't even necessarily make sense of. Certainly not with language. Yeah, 1000% take action. You get to the point of pretending to develop by taking more information to keep learning instead of coding. Yeah, and then you're just kind of like once you have all that information in your head and you're struggling because you actually have no application to test that information through. You have no thing that you're actually doing, and now you're just you can kind of rationalize yourself into having any opinion. That's why we have so much conflict on the internet and so much sort of dissonance, cognitive dissonance within our culture right now. And I think this has been kind of, there's been like a hypertrophy of this sort of thinking thanks to the internet. But I think we need to start coming around to a different attitude towards how we connect with each other. And to some large extent, I think it's by doing the thing. It's not by trying to out-rationalize each other. It's actually by like, what's the thing we're trying to, let's go and do the thing. Let's go and make our communities better. Let's go and get better at doing what it is that we do to provide and produce value for our communities. Like, let's go and actually do the thing. You can't just write a rule book that's going to successfully be comprehensive about all the things you actually need to do, because everything is always a moving target. There's nuance to every problem that you have to solve, and there's no rule book that can adequately apply totally to that nuance. Hopefully that makes sense. You're also not there to just get to the end of the song. It's about the entire song. Yeah, it's about playing the song. It's about experiencing the song. Like, it's really the journey that you're taking. And that's why I'm trying to do exactly what I'm doing here on the stream, is I'm taking it upon myself to learn something that I feel like a fish out of water with, which is games programming. As much time as I've poured into it so far, I still feel woefully inadequate. But the more I drive at this and the better I get at it, the closer I get to actually doing the thing, which is eventually building a game. However that game looks like, I'm still so far away from that, but you have to actually put in the work. You can't just, I'm going to read this book, I'm going to follow this tutorial, I'm going to do this thing, and it's just going to give me everything I need. No, there's so much that you have to do to actually get to an end result. And the end result isn't even necessarily the goal. Doing the thing is its own reward. I enjoy programming. I enjoy video games. I enjoy thinking about games, and putting those two together to do programming and thinking about building a game with programming. There's something about doing that for its own sake that's really satisfying. Even if I make a game and no one gives a shit, right? Nobody buys it. Maybe the people watching, you guys watching the stream will play it, and maybe I'll just give it to you for free, because I'm not necessarily trying to make a profit here. I'm doing this for my own enjoyment, and maybe someday I'll get to work as a graphics programmer. That's kind of like the pipe dream. It's not necessarily to go and make my own game that then sells millions of copies. It's because I want to do the thing. That's really what it comes down to. Streaming during working hours, hey Nutella. Yeah, I mean, I've got a flexible lunch break window, so I'm using that to my advantage. But I did not quit my day job to make games. That is not a thing that I will ever do. Most likely. So let's go ahead and keep on moving forward here.
That was just me being pretty dumb, actually. So now we can go ahead and walk off of it.
So actually, this could just work unless I did something else wrong, which is totally possible. I bumped the speed down. I should have just left it where it was and stuck to, a real big delta there, so we can... And you can see, now that I've increased the delta, the collision detection just gets more and more inadequate and inconsistent. You can see there's just a bigger gap there, because we're trying to make the yellow rectangle move that much further, that much more quickly. But we can see that even 1 frame's worth of delta in the player's movement would clip us into the wall, so it's not letting us do that. So that's not working. And that's not working still. So I probably have something else going on here that I've messed up. Or maybe when we made that change over here, I didn't do this properly. So he assigns the tiles from the second tile map over here. And this should be the bottom left tile map. And we should be able to enter into that tile map from the top one, and we're saying that's this one. And that makes sense because we're indexing down 1 in the Y direction when we try to go down. So this should be the tile map that we're looking at. It's 0, 1. So there is a door there, but we can see when I try to pass through the door here, I'm actually moving a little bit too quickly. It's acting as though there's a tile there. So maybe the actual logic of how we're looking at the next tile map over was done incorrectly when I was following that piece. It's totally likely. I'm going to go ahead and bump that speed down because 512 is just a bit too much. Yeah. That's fast enough to where I don't feel like it's taking forever for me to get around, but not too fast to where I'm just getting stuck on walls every time I touch the keyboard. So if we look at this here, we are examining in these 4 if statements whether the next tile map over, or whether we're actually trying to get into a new tile map with where we're at and trying to move the player to. And so for this one, you know, testing the X and Y, if the test tile X that we're trying to move to is less than 0, so if we computed a new value that actually kind of wraps, well, not wraps, but it gives us a negative tile value as though we're going to the left. It's saying, you know, we're going back, we're traversing, you know, backwards in the world. But for these other checks, and these are the ones that we care about, we want to make sure are working, right? Because we're trying to advance deeper into the world. We want to go down 1 tile map, which means that the test tile map Y index that we're on should increase to 1, and that the test tile Y we're on should wrap back up to now. So we get into the new tile map and we're starting at the beginning of that tile map in the Y direction. And that's what this is. That's what this should be accommodating, right? Because we're trying to get, if the new tile we're calculating is greater than the dimensions of an actual tile map in the Y direction, you know, that should be working just fine. But effectively what we have here is that this proc call is telling us that that point in the world is not empty when it should be. So clearly I have done something wrong. Otherwise it should have just worked right then and there. So if we're greater than or equal to 0 on the tile we're trying to move to, but we're less than count X and Y, go ahead and get that tile map value out. I guess what we could do is just check to make sure that the tile we're trying to move into is actually coming back as empty space and not a wall. I mean, well, I guess we could make sure that we're actually getting into this block at all. Once again, I'm going to have to import the format package. And I don't know why I'm trying to like format an object. I just want to say right here, you know, we have a tile map. And we're trying to test that tile map. And it should be the next tile map down or up, you know, out into the world. And I think I meant to change this. I think this was supposed to be, because what we realized, thanks to Mr. Intrinsic chiming in, is that just because the tile map index is valid in that it's within the bounds of the slice of tile maps that we have in memory, which comprise the game world, just because it's within those bounds does not mean that we're passing in a valid coordinate. So, well, yeah, so what we should do is put this in here, and then we should check the X and Y, because we have to actually check that the X and Y coordinates in the world that we're trying to pass to get to the right tile map is correct. It's not enough that it's within the bounds of the world slice of tile maps. So same thing here. Tile map X is less than world dot, what is it, tile map count X? Yeah. And then we do the same thing. We replace all of those X's with Y's. And now this should be a valid check. I don't think that's causing the bug, but that's just kind of a logic error, a logic bug that I meant to fix yesterday. How many episodes would you consider following before venturing into your own game development? You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I think that answer will come to me. It'll become apparent to me that I'm wanting to go off in my own direction, and I'm not feeling as motivated to follow the series. I just don't know when that point will come. I have a general target, and it's around day like 200 and something. He builds the hardware acceleration components for the rendering pipelines for the graphics stuff. So he spends like the first 150 days or so or whatever working on the software renderer, and then he starts looking into implementing GPU acceleration. And once I've gotten beyond the part where I can look at what I'm trying to render with a software renderer, and I can write that in OpenGL, or I can write that in Vulkan, or any, API, DirectX, Metal, whatever. If I can take what I understand about how to build it in OpenGL and start translating that into these different graphics APIs, then I'll feel pretty comfortable at that point, kind of going my own way. Because that's ultimately the goal that I have, is to become competent enough to hold my own with graphics, which isn't enough on its own to build a game, right? But it's a core component of what I'm interested in, and I think it'll drive whatever kind of game design, right, that I ultimately decide I want to try and go with. So there's no clear-cut answer there, but I'm hoping the answer will reveal itself to me. I suspect it'll be after that point, once we've implemented GPU acceleration, and that's around like day 200 something. So we're not anywhere close to that, right? It's going to take a long time. It's no problem, Evo1 build. I'm happy to. Part of the point of the stream is to connect with others and have discussions about this sort of thing. With a fast enough speed, you can completely bypass the wall. Yeah, that's a good point. And, Casey mentions that, I think earlier in day 30, so it's something to keep in mind for sure. Any reason I'm not using Odin's vectors? We're just not there yet. I'm trying to stick to the way that Casey does things, and he's not at a point where he's using vectors, but believe me, I am very excited to start doing that and use Odin's array programming to make that stuff easy, because that was a big pain point with Zig when I was following the series in Zig, and it really felt like it was slowing me down at times just to be so verbose with the way that I'm adding vectors together and subtracting them from each other, doing dot products, whatever. It just got really tedious to write all of that out in the way that Zig was forcing me to write it out in. And Zig does have a way, it has like a vector built in to where you can do certain things using just like an addition operator or a subtract operator, but it's not comprehensive enough. And then once you get into, so the way that Casey does things, there's a lot of like alignment stuff with pointers going on that was causing Zig's vectors to be incompatible. And I couldn't figure out how to get them to like cast or do the right alignment of it. Just it became a nightmare to deal with. So believe me, I'm excited to use those to use array programming in Odin. It seems like a really killer feature of the language that is going to make it a lot of fun, especially once we get to like the SimD stuff. But we gotta draw a tile map and do a whole bunch of other things before we can get that far. So I'm just going to make sure that we can build again and zoom around here. We have a tile map, and you know, it's still basically telling me, right, that I have a wall there. But we're not breaking, which is good. So if we have a tile map, and we're trying to get out this new test tile Y that we're trying to go to. What did that do? Did that like reformat my code a little bit? No. Okay. How do I want to do this? I need like an easier way to do indentation aligning. Still haven't quite gotten that far beyond just manually, you know, skipping around with tabs and stuff. So if we have a tile map value here, this right here should print out the tile map value that we're trying to get to based on the change that we're trying to apply to the player's movement, right? So if we print this out, this will confirm for us. And I guess I should print out some other things here too, like what is the test tile X and the test tile Y. I don't know why I'm writing these out here. That should go there. Test tile X. And we'll go ahead and break this print out. I don't want to have to do this. Print debugging always feels a bit amateur, but until I get that debugger set up, this is the life we'll live, right? And then the tile map. Well, what I want to know is the tile map X and Y. Like, is it, yeah, that's in the game state. So the tile map that comes out of this here, I guess what I should do is add another print there. That's what I'll do. So yeah, this is what we'll do. So we're going to print out, you know, the tile X and Y that we're trying to get to, and we're going to print out whether the tile map value that we pull out of those coordinates is actually empty. It's going to say that it's not empty, right? It has to, because that's why we can't move down. But we want to make sure that the tile map that we're getting the coordinates that we're passing in to get the tile map are the correct coordinates. And then I guess we should make sure that this is actually pulling out the right tile map index. So yeah, maybe I should verify here. I mean, we have a tile map, so it's getting out a valid tile map. It's just, is it the right one? Maybe I've still just messed up the assignment of the tiles here to their respective tile map. But it looks like I did the same thing, so I don't know, we'll just see. We'll hope that I did that right. And yeah, so I print this out, and we come down here. It looks like we're still trying to get the, well, it'd probably be better if I ran it in here in the terminal. Because you can see it's getting... It looked like it was only printing out the tile map coordinates within the world, and then not making it in. It wasn't getting a tile map out. And you see here, these values seem wrong. I guess I should have labeled these, huh? But I mean, you can follow the order of it, right? So this value right here is the test tile map X and Y. Or Y and X is the order that I have it in. And then over here, I have the X and Y swapped, but they're the same value anyway. It's saying we're 8 tiles into X and Y, and the tile map value is empty. Interesting. So it's actually an empty tile map point. According to the X and Y we're passing in, but it's on the wrong tile map, right? So we're getting here, and then this is somehow wrong. Which means somewhere in here, this is incorrect. This logic has to be wrong. Maybe it's greater than equals. Like if we get to the actual count of tiles, we'd actually be indexing one pass, right? So if I go back to where Casey had this code implemented. Yep. That is almost certainly the problem. So what was happening, right, is that this just wasn't indexing the tile maps in the world correctly. And therefore, it wasn't, we weren't ever hitting inside of here when we were trying to go one tile map deeper into the world. And so we weren't adding to the tile map indices to get at the correct tile map that we're trying to go to. And even though this was returning empty, in saying we can move, we're not actually moving the X and Y. I'm not sure why this was. I maybe my brain is just thinking about this wrong, but I would have expected, because the tile point we're trying to get to is empty, you know, that we'd see some strange behavior there. I'm also going to wipe this out because we definitely duplicated this is world point empty proc call, and Casey just kind of missed that, and he commented on it yesterday, but I wasn't paying close enough attention to delete my own duplicate of it. So now I think we should be good. Should be able to get into the next tile map. And we're hitting a wall here, but we are going deeper in. So I'm not sure what that's about. And we can go over to this next one. So we just... Now we can go into those next tile maps, but... And I am confused why I can't, like, go to the right, left or right here. Like, whatever value I'm hitting, whatever tile map value I'm hitting further down below, it's telling me it's not empty, but I can scroll all the way off on this side. So we just need to move the camera at that point. But I would have expected the block to be able to just, you know, kind of cruise off the screen right there, because there's no tile here, right? We should be getting blocked, or we should not be getting blocked if there's nothing here. If there was a tile right here, then sure. So there might be something else going on there, but Zig's vectors aren't great. Yeah, I did not have the best time with them. You can use open angle bracket. Well, you can use less than, greater than to align text. Probably checked it in VI and Helix. So like, how would I How would I go about doing this? Like if I did... I am using NeoVim, so I don't know if that makes a difference, but like if I wanted to... I guess I shouldn't naively just... Oh. Okay. Yeah, so I mean... Okay. Yeah, there's a... So what I would do before, I think, is I would like highlight a block like this, do a visual block, and then... Or not even... Yeah. I know. I think I knew about that. Pretty sure. It's weird because I don't actually think about the keys, you know what I mean? I just kind of follow the muscle memory, you know, I go like, this is how I do that. Yeah, and then if I like wanted to jump out 5, I do something like that. It's just like I want to quickly look at where I want the text to align, and I just want to like think, okay, this is the key I need to hit. Just align it to that spot. I don't know. I probably just have to get better at formatting quickly and not be a bitch about it. But who knows? Maybe there is a much easier way to do that stuff. Could the code that changes our height back up to the top of the screen be sending us back to the tile map above? It's worth taking a look. Like you're saying, so you're saying that the code that changes our height, meaning the height, like where we're at in the Y, like over here. Yeah, there could be some weird wrapping thing. Because I had that same, like, sensation when I went down here, right? I was like, I can't go here. It's almost as if I'm running into the same tile, but like this same tile right here. But then that doesn't make sense because, you know, even on this tile map where there is this pillar here, or this wall, I should be able to just go to the side. I think it'll become clear once we control the camera, right, to move to the tile map that we're indexed on, which is coming up next. So probably best to just move forward and see, because I think that'll make it easier to figure out whatever's going on there. It does seem almost like I'm colliding with this tile right here, right, again. Yeah, the player appears at the top of the screen. Yeah, well, yeah, so it could be that, right, because we're not changing the tile map, and maybe I missed it in case he actually saw the same behavior here. So we'll just keep moving forward.
All these crazy, that the C syntax for this math that you've been drilled in, let's double check and see it. Well, let's just walk off of it, as we would expect to, actually. So now we can go ahead and walk off of it.
No, he can walk all the way off, so there's something else going on here.
Though what happens, I don't know why exactly we stop. Oh, we don't stop, so there we go. So now that we've corrected it, it looks like we can walk off properly, and so that's good. So now all we have to do is allow our guy to actually change screens. And so we've already, what we want to do here again is we want to reuse some work, because as you can see, we do this isWorld.empty. The isWorld.empty thing actually does the work we need to figure out that we have wrapped on a tile, but we never get that information back.
Yeah, at least it looked to me like he was able to scroll all the way off. I guess I can sanity check since he's looking at this isWorld.empty proc right now. So we have the test tile map X and Y. We take the test X and Y tile coordinates within the tile map and we truncate them to ints. It could be that this truncation, the way I'm doing the truncation, is wrong somehow. But we assign these new test tile map coordinates because we can't change the procedure parameters in these conditionals. We negate to wrap the X and Y back down to the beginning of the next tile map's tile indices if we are less than 0 on the X and Y. And that all looks correct. And then on the same thing, if we're going, not if we're backtracking in the world, but if we're going forward, we should see Oh, yeah, no, that's correct. Oh, yes, yes. Okay. Basically what you were saying, Devil, is actually it. I just kind of blindly copied this stuff. And thinking about it now, just looking at it, obviously this is wrong. So we're subtracting the count. It's the test tile X that is wider than the world count X. So that makes perfect sense. Why did I write an equal sign? Okay, that makes me feel a lot better. I was like, what in the hell is that about? But this makes perfect sense. So we just weren't properly computing the correct values for test tile X and Y there. So we fixed this part where we were, not properly testing. We weren't properly comparing the size of the new tile coordinates with the bounds of the tile map dimensions, but we weren't properly getting that new test tile X and Y for the new tile map. So now, if we go out here and scroll off, we can go. Actually, we crash, which is no good, but that's fine. We'll deal. We'll deal with that. What is that error actually? Is it just telling me that I'm going off of the bounds of the slice? Yeah. So 163. I see. Yeah, I'm trying to write. Huh. I thought I didn't need this check anymore, but this actually does make sense because we are trying to. We calculate an offset that is actually off of the pixel buffer, and then we're trying to index into that. I guess. Huh. I guess I thought that these guards here would have protected us from trying to write out of the pixel memory because it's clamping. It should be clamping the min X and Y and the max X and Y. So when we calculate the offset, oh, was it because this needs to be like -1? Was that it? I can't remember exactly what Casey's version of this code looked like, but maybe he had to subtract 1 because this basically means that we're indexing. No, how can this be? Because we're only calculating off of the min X and Y. And that error was pretty clear. It's failing right here. Oh, I see. It's because the min. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm on the same page. It's because the min X and Y. We're checking to see if the max X and Y are greater than the size of the frame buffer, right, in memory. But we're not doing that. We're not clamping the min X and Y down. So, okay. Now I understand why that's happening the way it is. So I'll just re-add that guard. I think if offset is greater than, or rather is less than the length of the frame buffer memory, then we can just make sure that we don't do that. So I took that guard out thinking that the clamps there would fix it, and it didn't, but now we're good. See that? Awesome. Okay, we're finally caught up to Casey, and we have no crashes. Shouldn't be max X and Y are greater than or equal to. Yeah, that's a good point. You may be right about that. Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at with this -1 stuff here. So, yeah. Right, because if we left those unchecked, and then we were going like to the very corner, or... No, yeah, so it's not because... So you have two ways of looking at it, right? So we can either change the range that we're iterating over from min X and min Y to max X and max Y. If we say greater than or equal to here, then... Yeah, no. I think this is just fine because either way, we're only going up to the index before the max X and Y. just because of the way. Otherwise, I would have expected it to, crash much in the same way we had the crash because we were offsetting into the buffer too high. We should be crashing. If that was an issue, we'd be crashing here when we're trying to draw the rectangle off of the buffer, and same over here. I think we're good. And it's just because of the way we are iterating over those X and Y coordinates. So I think we're good. We can move on.
We never find out that it looked at a different tile. So when we accept the move, what we'd like to be able to do is then accept the fact that it moved to a new tile as well. And so what we want to do here is pull out this work in some kind of convenient way. Now you'll notice this is again leading into exactly what I want to get into next. So hey, that worked out pretty well. It turns out if you just write the code, it kind of guides you towards all of the right answers. That's sort of the thing that I, again, have been harping on over and over, and it's true again. The next thing that we want to do to clean up this code is exactly what it looks like we want to do, right? So we're passing all this stuff around, test x, test y, tile map, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, all of this is talking about a player's location, right? And they're all interrelated. You can't really talk about the test x and the test y very effectively without talking about which test tile the player is in. And that's going to be true of everyone who has a location that can be freely roaming, right, at some level. So what we want to do is we want to probably have a way of bundling these things together so that we can return them, right? We want to be able to do something. We'd like to be able to say like this, something like, I'm going to call it, I don't know, canonicalize maybe. I don't know. We're going to call it, I'm not sure what the name of this should be. But basically what I want to do is I want to pull this code out so that I can use it again, where I'm going to go ahead and take a tile map x, a tile map y, and a real offset inside that. And if this real offset is outside of the tile map, it will realign the test tile map x and y to correctly put this inside. We could call it normalize as well. I don't know.
There's just something, so he uses this canonicalize, like I didn't even know that was a word, I think, before. Before watching this series, and just like, shouldn't you feel so badass writing that word out? I'm gonna canonicalize these coordinates, man. There's just something about it that it's like, this is just the naming of it. I'm looking at the word, and it doesn't even make sense to me that this is a word. There's so many consonants and vowels going on here. Canonicalize. It just makes me want to think about shooting cannons in whatever game it is. We're gonna get canonical and shoot some cannons. And I know, isn't cannon spelt like this? Well, we can spell it like that. We are gonna canonicalize these fools and cook them. All right.
I'm gonna call it canonicalize for now, but basically what I want it to do is exactly what this function did, right? I want it to take these things, and I want it to sort of return these things as well. So I need it to have basically a struct that has them in it, right? I need a struct that's got this stuff so I can return it. Does that make sense? So maybe get canonical location or something like that, right? And I go ahead and I pass it in. I say this is a tile map position or something, or tile map location.
We're getting canonical. We're getting radical. Get canonical. And then we have a tile map. Whoops, gotta use my Ada casing. And yeah, this will all just be same way we have these types in that proc signature, and then we can really clean up that function signature, which I think is what he's driving at. Because having to pass like 5, 6, 7, 8 parameters gets nasty. One thing too that, what was your name again in there? Andrew. One thing I'm sure that you come across before, since it sounds like you're writing some Zig, is that it can be, I was really feeling like I was missing those default parameters, and not as much the function overloading. I found ways to just name things differently to deal with that problem, but not having default values, it was getting a bit tedious in Zig, because I'm very used to and comfortable with default parameters in like almost every other language. Certainly every language that I've used professionally. A lot of those high-flying, dynamically typed languages, Elixir, Ruby, Python. I actually don't know if I've really used default parameters, or even for sure that they're a thing in Python. I feel like they are, but certainly in Elixir, they're my bread and butter to work with. You just use config structs with default params. Yeah, that seems like a good way to deal with that. I think the reason why it was so painful was because I was trying to do things exactly the way Casey does them, and so that was just kind of getting in my way. And if if I could go back in time and do it all from scratch, I might do that and have default params on those structs. So anyway, so we have our tile map position struct. It's got the test tile map coordinates and the tile coordinates within the tile map themselves, and we'll keep on rolling forward.
Or maybe just a world location, let's say. A world position. I don't know. I'm not sure what to
location.
name it yet. But I want to be able to say, I want to be able to say something like, let's pass one of these in. I want it to do the same math that it was doing. So I'm going to pass in a world position, and I can probably pass this in by value, right? And then it's going to return one by value. So this is just a simple inline function, let's say, that can be inlined anywhere. That all it does is it does the truncation, and then it does the check, right? So it's basically going to do this exact math that I wanted, this, right? And it's going to take sort of something that could have been a bogus position that's been, sort of that's wrapped outside of this tile. It's going to take it and realign it into what we would consider canonical form, which means that it's always the real part is always going to be sort of within one tile map boundary. Okay.
All right, so then he's just going to flatten out that struct, but I'm going to need all of this. Throw it in our get canonical proc here, and I guess we're going to have to just assign these off the world. Well, it's a pointer now, right? So we can just change it. He's not passing it in as a pointer, so maybe that's just not the way to go. I'll let him keep working on this code and see if he turns that into a pointer. But I don't, we're calculating, whoops, did not mean to do that. What have I done? Oh, I screwed that up. Where the heck? Yeah, I jumped into the Q&A, it looks like. Accidentally minimized my Casey window here. Where the hell were we? There we go. So we are in get canonical position. Looks like that's actually still too far. There we go. I guess I did not see that he added this. All I saw was get canonical. Ah, that's right. Okay, yeah. Get canonical, location, get canonical, position. Naming is always fun. So yeah, what was I thinking about? So we need to get the position for the new tile map coordinates, and then this is going to return... I don't think this is going to return a bool in the end. I'll just see where he goes with it.
Going to do this exact math that I wanted, this, right? And it's going to take sort of something that could have been a bogus position that's been, sort of that's wrapped outside of this tile. It's going to take it and realign it into what we would consider canonical form, which means that it's always the real part is always going to be sort of within one tile map boundary. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Hope you can all see what I'm doing here. I'm just sort of canonicalizing. I'm sort of wrapping these up into something that we can reason with cleanly. So basically, I've got this guy here. It's got the tile map x and the tile map y, and it's got his x and y inside that, right? So it's like a pixel x and a pixel y, if that makes sense. So hopefully that makes some reasonable sense. So and in theory, we could also even do this. We could even do this down to the tile level. I'm not sure if we want to, but we could even do this down to the tile level even more explicitly. I'm not sure if we want to do that or not. We'll have to see how we decide to actually play with these. All right. So we're going to get the canonical position. We're going to pass that in there. What we're going to do here is basically turn test x, test y into pose x, pose y, right, like this. And then essentially...
I assume that he's going to have to pass the world pointer in here. He hasn't done that yet, but I went ahead and added it because we still need to know some of these things off of the game world. So like he's saying, we're going to grab the x and y off of the world position. And what happened here? World does not have tile map. It does not have test tile map X and Y. Huh. Why was it? Did I add those in? Why did I do that? I have no idea why I did that. That was just wrong. Yeah, this is gonna come off the world position. That's why I did that. That's what I meant. And it's not test tile map X and Y now. I guess it's just tile map X and Y. And then, you know, we'll just return true for now, but I suspect that return value is going to change.
All of the stuff that we do for the tile map is now going to be being done on pose like that. So there we go, right? So basically that just does that canonicalization for us, and so we can do the get canonical position like that. Now that we have get canonical position, our isWorldMap.empty function is sort of useless, but we're going to keep it around anyway just because, hey, why not? So basically what all we need to do here is we need to say, you know, get canonical position for whatever the pose is that we were looking at. So can pose, test pose, something like this, and we will go ahead and use the values out of that.
So he's intending to modify the thing he's passing in, but he's not going to... Is he just going to do it by value? I'll wait and see if he changes that. But we're definitely going to return, you know, I don't know if it'll be like new position, that sort of thing. Or I guess what he does, and I've taken to doing this a lot myself, is just calling it the result. And that always makes it really clear to me, like, what is the thing being dealt with and returned by this, instead of it being like contextual. Like if this was just world position, there's something nice and consistent about calling it a result object, or, you know, piece of data, whatever it is, whatever you want to refer to it as. This little chunk of memory represented by these different members in this struct, I want to make it very clear that this should be the result of that proc call. And I like using that convention, so I'm using it like in the code that I write, even at my day job or on my startup, that sort of thing. So now over here, all of this needs a can pose. There's something about that naming that's just a little bit funny to me. Get canonical position. We're passing in the world and a test position. And then we're gonna change these procs to take that new position here soon.
So test tile map. So yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it, we already are computing. Since we're computing this value as well, I guess we would probably want to keep that, right? As a fully world qualified position, right? There's also this is kind of interesting. Now that I think about it, there's different ways we could use this, right? Because we don't probably want to store this value, right? But it's kind of the thing that gets produced. The fully computed position is sort of this thing, which means we could start thinking of these floating point offsets as being within a tile itself as well. I don't know. This is kind of interesting. This is not as rote as I thought it was going to be. There's some interesting things here. I'm gonna have some fun. I think playing with this stuff. In some sense, you might think of it as there being two of these, and I wonder even if I want to represent that, where there's essentially there's sort of a canonical position, and like a raw position, right? I don't know if this makes sense, but basically you could think of there as being. I'm not sure I actually want to keep this abstraction, but I'm just gonna, since we've got only about 15 minutes left, I'm gonna show what it would look like to do it, because I'm interested. I'm interested to see. You could think of it this way: there's a raw position, which is just I was on some tile map and I had some random x and y value that I wanted to test, right? And then once I do some work on it, I also now know which tile that we're in, right? And so in some sense, you could think of this as the canonical position takes in a raw position, right? And then the result of that, right, canonical position, like this, the result of that is going to be something that gets computed entirely out of this, right?
Okay. Yeah, so he's just assigning it all to the result, and therefore he's not modifying the position going in there. I don't know why my brain just didn't get that far with it, but that makes perfect sense. So the raw position, what was he throwing in there? Tile map X and Y. And then, yeah, so basically it's the same thing as the canonical position, but the canonical position is comprehensive in that it's saying where we are in the whole game world, which is what he was just talking about. But a raw position is just like, here's where we are in just the tile map, in the context of the tile map that we're operating within. So got to change all of this. Is there another reference to a world P? No. So we have our result, and then like he's saying, we can just say that God. What is happening to me? I can't type. That will assign everything. In fact, does he just assign the whole result up front? Probably not. Like, does he copy it from the world position? Or the canonical position? The test position, I should say. Yeah. Now we have all these test values. I wonder if I can just neatly sub all of this out and say result. Yeah. I gotta clean up that new result. And that looks good. And we have to do the same thing for this block, which I missed. Sweet. We're on our way. What is going on with this error? Expected a comma, got a new line? What? Well, OLS is telling me one thing and the compiler is telling me another thing. Why would I try to run the PDB? That makes no sense. What is happening? Oh, yeah, I don't want to build the executable. I just want to try and... Or I don't want to run the executable. I just want to try and compile. Damn. What is going on with me? Expected a comma, got a new line. What on earth do you mean? What am I missing here? I don't see a missing comma. Is it just because of whatever this is? A variable declaration? Oh, duh. We aren't instantiating anything right there. But we're still getting this build error. How bizarre. X comma Y, they're floats. What is your problem? I cannot make heads or tails of this error that I'm looking at. This is how you do it. This is how it's done. What if I do that? What if I just wipe that line out? I must have done something really weird when I copied that stuff over. Oh, no trailing commas. Yeah, I forgot that okay. The trailing commas got me. Okay, so now we've got some fresh errors here. That makes sense. And all this is messed up because we aren't that far yet. Yeah, Devil, you were spot on there. I neglected. I put my faith in the trailing commas, but just escaped my attention. That's all. I've gotten plenty used to it. It's just, yeah. I mean, the error said it all, right? And I've seen that error probably like a dozen times now, and been like, oh yeah, I'm missing a comma. I don't know what happened there. My brain short circuited.
Let's see. Tile map, and this would have been a bug, so that's good that I didn't finish doing that because I don't really want to edit the one in place, so that's not actually correct. So anyway, okay, so result. There we go. Fixes the bug that we didn't have to deal with yet. Okay, so we got the get connect position. We pass in a position. We get one back. We get that result back. So what we want to do here is say that result tile map x equals pose tile map x, right? Result tile map y equals pose tile map y. So we copy those guys in, and then we have to figure out what our
Yeah. So maybe we should have just assigned the whole thing over, but maybe it's better to be explicit. I don't know. I hear an angry child. Let's get into that time. Let's get into that nap time. For poor little Oliver out there.
x and y is going to be. And this is something that we haven't actually dealt with either yet, right? When we do this tile map advancing, we're going to have to deal with the x and y floating point values as well, right? So another reason we might want to do this, in fact, this is all looking a little bit better now that I think about it. When we go to the canonical position, this x and y value could actually be inside a tile as well if we wanted to, which gets us out of the business of dealing with wrapping the x and the y. Because remember, the x and the y were wrong before. We never finished actually dealing with the x and the y, because the x and the y are offsets in the tile, in the space of an entire tile map. So when we wrap those to the next thing, they would have been wrong. If we do them inside a tile, we're already dealing with wrapping the tile x and y. If this is relative to a tile, it would just work. So I'm starting to like this. I'm interested in this. I'm going to just, and like I said, this is what exploratory programming is all about. I've never done a tile map game before, so I'm just kind of finding out what I like about how these things work. So I'm going to pursue this because it feels kind of good to have it be relative to a tile. That seems kind of like it saves a little bit of work, maybe. So I'm going to go ahead and write this function that way and say, all right, we come in, we've got a tile map x and y. We know that that's not going to change unless we wrapped, and that's fine. We compute what the tile x and tile y are from this sort of offset inside the tile map, right? Does that make sense? So we go ahead and do that. Excuse me.
Oh, I did this twice.
We might even just
I wrote the same thing out twice.
Yeah,
what is wrong with me?
This is looking good. We're not going to get to do all of this today, so you're going to have to blow my nose. It is that time of year when I occasionally get the sniffles. I'm not...
The Oxford comma programming. I like that. Can't forget your Oxford commas in your code.
Thick at the moment, thankfully. All right. Anyway, yeah, I like where this is going, so we're going to keep going this direction, because then we can get rid of this. Storing it relative to the tile seems like a really good idea now that I think about it. I just didn't think about it before, so this is going to be good. All this is just coming out kind of naturally in the course of seeing what the code had to do. And again, I can't emphasize that enough. It didn't require any forethought. It just requires trying it, seeing what happens, and then going, oh, duh. And that's a much easier way to program than trying to guess everything up front, especially when you've never done it before, because you're likely to guess wrong. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say we're taking this raw position in. We take the pose x, we subtract it out. We then come up with our tile x. And so what I'd like to do now is refigure out what the x and y would be inside the tile, right? So what I want to do is I want to say, all right, that pose x, pose y, so let's do something like this. Let's first subtract out the relative to the tile map for the x and the y, right? Let's do this, because we need this value, right? So that's the x and the y relative to the tile map. We then go ahead and truncate real 32 to in32. We've got that, but what we'd like to do now is compute the offset as well. So the result x, right, is going to be that tile x times the tile width. That is where the upper corner, right? This is where the upper corner of the tile would be, right? This is the upper, this is the left part, and this is the top part of that tile. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to go ahead and subtract out, I'd like to subtract out that upper left corner of the tile from where I was in the pose, whenever we got passed in. So now this is a tile relative x and y, right? Note, Casey, this is tile relative x and y, and this at the moment, and I think we're gonna get rid of this eventually, that's what my spidey sense is saying, tile map relative x and y. So basically these x and y tells us how far we are away from the upper left corner of the tile map. This says how far away we are from the upper left corner of a tile, right? And so all I'm doing is saying, okay, let's make this, let's make that relative, right?
Gotta get caught up. So he's just breaking this out, right? Turning this into a more multi-line thing. Narrowing the code, making it less wide. So we take that x and y value, truncate it, divided by the tile width and height. It looks like he's actually truncating the result of the division here. So that could have caused us problems. And then we've got an issue here where we're trying to assign the results of this calculation to get the tile relative x and y. Yeah, trying to assign the tile map relative x and y to, sorry, not the tile map relative, the tile relative X and Y. I remember getting so tripped up because you're trying to think of like, where am I at in the tile map? Where am I at in the array of tile maps that makes up the whole game world? And conflating those two back and forth, causing me lots of, gaps in my understanding of what's actually going on. But this time around, it's all just feeling a little bit more intuitive. It's still not like I look at it and I get it straight away. But all in good time. I guess I would just say, tile map relative X and Y, and then tile relative X and Y. Yeah, so we're in the tile map with raw position. This is using the context of the tile map. I feel like if I was to name this would be like the position within the tile map, and this would be the world position. Basically the way he had it before, but we're gonna keep changing these things as time goes on, so I don't want to go off in my own direction and just make it that much more confusing to move forward. I'm just like making little notes to myself, like what's the way that I would name this to make it make sense in my brain. Okay. Yeah, so we still have this type conversion thing. I'm guessing he's going to have to cast that. We'll see.
Now we don't have to care about these X and Y's anymore. They're always going to be right as we adjust which tile we were looking at, this test tile X, test tile Y stuff. That's now, that is just going to be totally correct. When we do the adjustment, the X and Y won't have to be adjusted because it's relative to the tile. So we adjust the tile, we get the positional adjustment for free. So I think, let me see if I've got this all right now. Let's see, there we go. There we go. All right. So I need to return this. Here is the result. So I don't know, that was a bunch of typing, and like I said, hard to pay attention on the stream sometimes, so we're going to have to step into that and make sure that we didn't introduce a bunch of random stupid stuff that shouldn't actually happen. But now we can call get canonical position. So basically get canonical position, this thing, if it takes in a raw position, for example, and then wants to go ahead and get that canonical position out, it can do so. So this will take in a raw position and say, okay, that's the pose we're going to test. So we go ahead and get the test pose in. We then take the canonical position that came out. We ask if the tile map is empty by saying, all right, the tile map X and the tile map Y tell us which tile map we're looking at, and then the tile X and the tile Y of that tile map tell us where in the tile we are. So we go ahead and do that. And
whole lot of compiler errors, but let me get caught up with him first because we need to pass in that test position to is world point empty, which nicely shortens that procedure signature. And I'm assuming, well, actually this is not, it's a raw position, but we're calling it the test pose. And we cannot assign this to that because the actual, this doesn't take a canonical position, it takes a raw position. And it's also gonna have to take the world, the game world.
And of course, we need a world pointer here because otherwise we can't canonicalize.
There we go.
Use result here again, just kind of dealing with the cleanup of changing how all these things are accessed. Okay, and then here we are. So this is our canonical position. We get that out.
I see.
Which does not take.
It's not can pose as in can you take this position within the world. It's can as in canonical position.
Well, that's true. It doesn't. It needs the world to do its work, so we pass it the world.
Yeah, did I even... Yeah, I did pass that in. So we just need to clean up these signatures now to use the canonical position. And yeah, get that out of there. Get that out of there. And pretty sure we get these off of the canonical position as well. Sweet. Less errors, more good.
Typo there. And then here, this is now going to take raw positions entirely. So, okay, we've got raw positions, and those raw positions are the player pose, right? And we can go ahead and do the player pose, and then we've got some different poses that come out of that. So we've got tile map X and tile map Y there. And we've got the X and the Y, which is these, right? So basically, I'm just going ahead and building one of these quickly. Of course, we're going to want to do a bunch of stuff with this now, since this is starting to actually come together here. So that's going to be player pose.
Is that everything that takes? I think it's just the 4 different coordinates there. But are they in the same order? I think so. Yeah, tile map X and Y first. And then yeah, it's just I'm still grappling with this. So the tile X and Y are the actual position within the tile map. Or no, sorry. These should be the global X and Y, should they not? Yeah, because those are the... Gosh, my stomach, again. Will not stop barking at me. He's passing in the game states player tile map X and Y. So these are actually the tile map X and Y. But that's not what he has them. Oh, no, he does have them named over there. Okay, that was contributing to my confusion there. Okay, so that's just going to get the game state tile map X and Y. And I guess I could put these on the same line. Why not? And then, well, actually, I don't know why I did that. We don't want anything off the game state. We want the new player X and Y that we are testing to see if that's a valid place to move to. And what is the deal now? What is that complaining about? Game state, type state has no field, tile map Y. Oh, because it's player, right? Yeah. And now this is taking in too many arguments, so at this point, I think I'm jumping a little bit ahead of where he's at now, but I just want to stay in the flow of where I'm at in my brain, my understanding of what the hell is going on here. And actually, this is going to be a little bit different. Is he going to just get the pose off of... I think I shouldn't have jumped ahead there, because this is going to be a little... Yeah, because we're adjusting the X to account for the going out to the sides, each of either side of the rectangle. Let's see how he handles that.
We're going to build a player pose. Then we're going to do raw position left, player left. That's going to be equal to the player pose, and the only...
I see. So he's just creating like a boundary for the player's hitbox here. Or I guess, yeah, all these are just player left. Oh, I see. Yeah, he's just going to copy it off of the original. That makes more sense. Player pose, and then player left. Ugh. Equals player pose. Do the same thing for the player right. And then we're just going to adjust the X position on each of these, right? So it would be like player left X equals player left X minus 0.5 times the player's width. Same thing with the player right, but instead of subtracting, we'll add. And that might be all we needed to do.
The difference there for the player left and the player right is that we're going to subtract that width from the X, right? So we've got that player left and then the player right.
How could I do this to myself? How do I forget something that is so convenient, right? Plus equals, minus equals. You. And that looks much better.
Okay, so now we are just doing isWorld.empty, player pose, that, player left, and player right. There we go.
Okay, now we can jump in and carve all this out, make this look a lot less hideous. Player left, And whoa, player right. If you can learn to spell words correctly. And we still have that type deal. I do not see that issue on his end, so I wonder if I just have screwed up some aspect of this calculation of the result X and Y for the world position.
Now, we should be in a place where we are working a little more cleanly. Already you can start to see this stuff is getting a little cleaner. We now no longer have giant strings of variables that we're passing, so we could, which we could have gotten the order wrong of or get confused about what is what. At least now we're passing sort of some bundles, and those bundles look a little more intelligible, and we know what they mean on the inside, so that's a little handier. We're pretty far from where we would want to be, but we're certainly making some progress. And so let's go ahead and take a look in here and see where we are at. We've got our player pose. Let's see what that is. It's on 0, 0, 150, 150. That is exactly where it should be. Our player left, our player right. Where are those? We can also get rid of all of this stuff now. Goodbye. So let's take a look at those. 127.50. Nope. Got a bug. Got a typo. I did the player right. I need to add. That's not. There we go. Oh, I keep forgetting I don't have to close because we've got our nice little. Yeah. Well, anyway. Okay, so that's our player left and our player right. That is good. So let's go into is_world_empty and look at our get canonical position call. Our get canonical position call is working between.
So maybe his code, because he's in C, is implicitly converting some of this stuff, but I'm pretty sure those were all ints. And the tile width and height, pose X and Y. It could just be that it's implicitly converting this to a float in that operation that he has. So if I go back and make sure I know generally where I was leaving off from. Yeah, those are all ints. So is it as simple as just casting that to a float? I'm still doing something wrong. What the hell? Oh, the tile width and height are floats? Yeah, that's correct. So it's just, yeah. It's taking this. This is the only int in the operation. All right, because that X and Y are floats too. So yeah, this is just being implicitly converted to a real 32, as he calls them. And now we're good. So far, so good. Still not changing the camera, but we'll get there.
We're certainly making some progress. And so let's go ahead and take a look in here and see where we are at. We've got our player pose. Let's see what that is. It's on 0, 0, 150, 150. That is exactly where it should be. Our player left, our player right. Where are those? We can also get rid of all of this stuff now. Goodbye. So let's take a look at those. 127.50. Nope. Got a bug. Got a typo. I did the player right. I need to add. That's not.
Thanks, Devil. You're right. The best viewers are already here. And I can't just help but feel sorry for anybody that feels the need to pay for viewers or whatever. Like, I know everybody's got to grind and we've all got to make our way, but there are so many other choices you can make than to either sell fake viewers, or buy fake viewers. I mean, talk about a fake existence.
Yeah. Oh, I keep forgetting I don't have to close because we've got our nice little. Yeah. Well, anyway. Okay, so that's our player left and our player right. That is good. So let's go into is_world_empty and look at our get canonical position call. Our get canonical position call is working between two things. It's working between a canonical position that it's trying to produce and a pose that it gets in, which is not necessarily it's mapped relative to the tile map. So okay, so here we go. I go into my result and I say, all right, let's copy the tile map X and the tile map Y for starters, and those are both 0 obviously already. I'm going to compute the X and the Y, which is basically the X and the Y relative to the tile map itself. There you go. That computes that, which is exactly what we expected because there's an offset of -30 on the X for things, so that's exactly what we expect. Let's go ahead and grab those tile maps out and see what the tile X and Y is. This tile map is 3 and 2. Is that correct? I don't know if that's correct or not. Is that where we're supposed to be? 3, 2? I'm not sure.
The more and more I watch him do these debugging sessions with the debugger proper, the more I want to set up a debugger for myself so I can step through the code with him. I just think that would be like, that's part of the experience of doing it this way and following this series, I think. And it's like been a piece of it that I've been missing the whole time I've been following his stuff.
If that's where we're supposed to be. That's a good question. I guess I don't know where the guy starts. Let's assume it's correct for now, but maybe that's something we'll have to look at later if it's not. So yeah, so 3, well, if it's 150, 150, 180, 150, yeah, I think that is right, because it's a little further over in X and Y, and the tiles were something like, what were they, 90 a piece or 60 a piece? I don't know, what are they? How big are our tiles, people? 60 a piece. So yeah, if it's an additional 30 over, then it would be, then 60, let's see, 150, 0.0, divided by the tile width, 2.5, yep, so it would be just over, so that's fine. All right, totally fine, makes sense. We then recompute and say, where are we relative to our tile? So, okay, result X and Y, no, that is, okay, so that is totally not correct at all. That's just totally bogus. So we've got an issue. We have an issue here. So our result tile X, what has happened here? What has happened? Our pose X, oh, awesome. Yeah, I did all the work. This is very common on the stream, people. I did all the work and then didn't use it. So we intentionally made things relative to the tile map so that I could compute with that, because I didn't want to deal with things that were in the offset space that, you know, with the shift of the screen. Again, a lot of stuff will go away once we get even further down the coordinate line of things. But all right, so I'm gonna remove the X and the pose X, pose Y, and use the actual values I computed that were relative to the tile map, because that is what I needed to use. That the reason I did that is because I need to use that in order to do this sort of computation. I can't subtract out the position that I ended up computing for the upper left of the tile if I don't also take into account the upper left X. So that's why I wanted to get rid of that ahead of time. So that's just a bug. That's just was just a stupid mistake. All right, so let's come back in here. And you know what we could do too, since we have assert now.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it should have been working like this. I scrolled off and I was like, well, I mean, I guess it's still not working. But essentially the idea is that we want to modify the like global position that we are in within the game world at some point in here. So we'll just keep on chipping away at this until we get there.
Added an assert. What we could also do is assert that our results of mapping into the tile space, right, that those are always within the bounds that would be allowed, right? We can just say that once we put something in tile space, it should never be allowed to be too far off of the outside of the size of a tile, right? Okay. Oops.
I didn't catch those whole assertions. So he's saying, you know, we want the X and Y to not just be, well, I guess I didn't need to delete that. We want it to be greater than 0, obviously, because we can't go negative into the scope of the world's tile maps. And why did that turn into, I guess I duplicated that. So it's like, why did I put a Y in there? It's because you're just copying and pasting, silly. Just change the code and shut up about it. Or I guess, yeah, no, that's not what this is saying. This is saying that the X and Y, well, let me actually look at this. The world tile width and height. Yeah, we just can't be outside the bounds of the tile for whatever position we're trying to get to on like a specific tile. That's what that is. Okay.
Too far off of the, outside of the size of a tile, right?
Yeah, he just says it right there.
Okay. Oops. So I actually did mean to stop there. There we go. So now our result should always be, yep, and that's more what we expected. We should never be able to get a negative there because it's relative to the upper left corner of a tile, so that's good. We go through and we check. Of course, we can't really debug those cases yet because we're not hitting them at all. So we go in here, we get our canonical pose. Let's make sure that canonical pose is sensical, and it is 0, 0 times. Yep, all looks good. We go into getting the tile map. That's just a straight up lookup, so that didn't change at all. Nothing particularly weird there. We come in here, we look at the test tile, we see what the value is. We see, yep, nothing particularly odd. So off we go, and now we can drive around. In theory, all our stuff should still work. It does seem to work, so that's pretty good. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary there, and that is a good thing. We actually don't want to be out of the ordinary in this case. We can walk off the screen, and that is good as well. So we are all happy. So the only thing we have left to do now, I suppose, is to actually move where the player is on the tile map afterwards. So we've set ourselves up to do that. Presumably it should be pretty straightforward. Basically we have that player pose thing down here. When we do player pose, if we accept a new state for the player, a new X and Y for the player, what we should basically do is say, let's go ahead and actually move the player to a new tile map where warranted. And so we can do that pretty easily because now we've got the canonical thing, although there is one thing that we still haven't quite done yet that makes it a little bit uglier than it should be. But what we can do now is just call the function that we used. We have our ability to get a canonical position out of for the player's position. So his new position, right, which is this one here, the new player X, right? That new position we can just ask to get canonicalized, and that will tell us sort of the new state of the dude. Now the problem is the dude is still in tile map relative coordinates, not in yeah, the player is still in tile map relative coordinates, and what we've done basically is we've converted things over to being tile relative for locations, and so this is still going to be a little ugly than it needs to be, and so the first thing we could probably do on Monday is fix that, but I'm going to go ahead and type it in anyway, just using what we've got, just so we can see if it worked. So we're going to go ahead and get the canonical position. Once we have the canonical position, that has a tile map X and a tile map Y in it, so we're going to go ahead and put that in here, right? Just grab out where the player is now, and then all we need to do is
Oh, because I don't think we have members for this, or do we? I think it's player tile map, X and Y. Why can't I go to definition? So maybe it's not. Where is my game state? I just can't go to definition of game state for some reason. Oh, it's because it's, yeah. Once again, I just named it plain old state. Player tile map X and Y, they're right there. And then player X and Y, yeah. Cool. And so then when we come back through the next game loop, these should be updated, and it should just give us a new view at the current tile map that we're supposed to be on.
Rectify this stuff, and that's pretty easy to do, right? We've got the canonical pose, it's got an X and a Y in it, and all we have to do is add in the upper, sort of how far they were in tile X and tile Y space. So can pose tile X times the tile width, right? Can pose tile Y, this, and then of course we need the offset X right in there. What is it called? It's oh sorry, it's upper left X and upper left Y. So do you see what I have to do here? Like in order to get the player location.
He's about to explain it, so I mean, I feel stupid just reiterating it, but if I say it out loud to myself, I think I've got a better chance of retaining this information. So we start from, you know, the upper left Y and X of the world, which is negative 30 and 0. I'm not sure what this negative 30 is about. But we start there, and then we go, you know, the world's width of tiles times the number of tiles we are in the world out. And this has to be a Y, and that has to be a height. So kind of the same way that we index into the you know, either the frame buffer or get at the tiles themselves when we're asking for the tile map and the slice of tile map memory, or the slice of tiles in each tile map's memory. We want to go by that width and that height times the number of tiles. And then add in the actual like X and Y within that tile. So this gets us, what the hell did I just do? This much gets us to the exact tile we're at within the world. If I can highlight this without covering it up. And then we go X and Y into the tile itself with the stuff here. So I think that's good. I think we're looking good. Wait until he switches to Remedy BG. I don't even know what that means, dude.
The new location, these locations are in world space that the player is. It's just, I'm sorry, in screen space. It's just a coordinate on the screen. And so I have to take our coordinate system and refigure out where he is on the screen. I have to say, all right, the upper left corner of the tile map space, plus the tile width times how many tiles in he is, plus where he is relative to the tile. I got to do that stuff. I think I typed it in right, I'm not sure. But as we're getting to the end of the stream here, let's see, can pose the canonical position, got to pass the world location there. Oops, and oh, and these are all going to be dots because we're that, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, player tile map, is that what it is? Player tile map, yeah. Player tile map, there we go. And let's see now.
Once again, I think he's getting an implicit float conversion. So, which of these, and I guess I'll just break this up because this line is just a smidge too long now. It's not highlighting anything for me, but maybe if I do this, it will. It's just telling me that there's... Okay, so it's the tile height times the tile Y that we're on. Tile height is a float. Tile Y, I'm guessing, is the only int in this whole expression here, because the X and Y in the tile is a float. Yeah. And then the upper left X and Y are floats, so it's really just this. Same thing as before. In Zig, you know, Andrew can attest to this, but, you know, if I want to do the same thing, and so it was the array programming or vector stuff in Zig that got pretty painful, and then also the casting, which was heavily tied into the vector stuff, because sometimes you're casting between vectors and you're doing alignment crap, and it just gets pretty nasty. So if I wanted to do the same thing here in Zig, and this line here, I'd have to go like as, and that's saying like I want to take, you know, the second param that I pass to this built-in in Zig, and I want to turn it into an F32. And then that's not all. I can't just do this here. I also just specify the type of cast, and I have to say, you know, I'm taking an int and I'm casting it to a pointer, so I want to say float from int. And you can also do, you know, things like bit cast. And you can also, obviously, like if tile X was a pointer, a float of one type, not a pointer, a float of one type, and I wanted to cast it to a float of another type, I would do like, you know, float cast, or if it's an int, you know, and I want, let's say I have a int32, and I want to cast it to an int64, I have to do this. And as you might imagine, that got pretty painful after a while, having to do that all over the code base. I understand that Zig has its motivations for doing things that way. You know, the philosophy behind the language is to make everything explicit. You don't have any implicit logic anywhere. So I get it. It's just I couldn't bear to keep doing it. I could if I figured out how to get better about making it less verbose. You know, some of it is just like I would start doing float from int and align casting, all this different kinds of casting stuff when a bit cast was easier, but then bit cast has like less explicit, you know, depending on the context you're using it in. Like I'd have to do conditionals around the type of cast I'm doing, or at least I'd have to like do an operation before or after a cast based on whether one of the operands was negative, because it won't let you cast from that. That was the main thing, is like, let's say I want a U32 from an int32, and then tile X is an int32, or I think in this case it's an int64, but that's neither here nor there. I want to go from an int32 to a U32. If the signed integer is negative, it won't let you do this, right? And so that would cause a lot of pain. I could just do a bit cast, but then you're kind of like skirting around the philosophy of the language, which is to be more explicit. So anyway, don't want to get bogged down in that detail too much, but I got really tired of that after a while. It's Handmade Debugger. Is that... I guess I need to look into that more. Because I really want to try the rad debugger and see if I can get that to work, because I know other people writing Odin have been able to get it to work with rad debugger. But I guess I'll take a look at that too. Just use abs if you know it's always positive. That's the thing, it wouldn't always be positive. I would need the bits as they're represented in the int to go to the U32. I want the bits. So the bit cast was probably the right way to go about it. But for a while I didn't know how to reason through that. So I was doing conditionals around the types of casting I was doing. And I was like, this is just crazy. Like, I'm just trying to do the thing. You know, I want to do the thing. I don't want to get trapped by language details. So, anywho, let's keep going. Hopefully I can wrap this up here soon.
We can. Oh wow! All right. Well, that was not an auspicious beginning there, people. Not an auspicious beginning at all. Why did we crash there, though? I just want to restart the app because we still have some PDB problems that we need to chase down in terms of it not loading our PDB. So let's get that crash again. There we go. All right.
So I'm not sure why he's crashing. Hopefully we don't have the same error, because I'm sure that'll take me. Yep, we do have the same error. Well, I mean, if it's the same problem that he's having, then you know, it should be relatively easy to fix as long as I can pay attention to what the heck he's doing and how he's doing it. So,
all right. So we're getting close to working. I don't think anyone will mind. I don't know, will you? If I just go ahead and debug this, we were so close to being done. Might as well take 5 more minutes and just finish debugging things. All right. So we've got an assertion here, which is that our result y is less than or equal to 0.
Was the assert?
There? Oh, I don't know if we're having a truncation issue. Let's find out here. All right. So what we had, and this could be good too if this could be if it's what I was expecting it to be, but it might not be. All right. So we take in a position and we say all.
I want to make sure that that's actually, before we go any further, that's actually what is causing the crash here. Runtime assertion at line 255. So, yep, right here. Same thing, same problem.
Right, the tile map x, tile map y, that's fine. We take in our x, and our x is going to be 482. That seems fine as well, relative to tile map. And our y, we've stepped off the top of the screen, so it's negative, so that's fine as well. What that ends up doing is that ends up producing a negative tile value, or it should, right? So let's see. When we computed our tile x and our tile y, we ended up with a tile y of 0. So, okay. So it is what I thought it was, which means we will have to actually address this now. Unfortunately, we're kind of towards the end of the stream, which is not exactly what I was hoping to see happen here. But let's go ahead and try to think of how I can best step into this here. Well, you know what I can do? This is what I can do. Because now we actually have to face this issue a little more cleanly. So, okay, so what I could do here is let me just call this function synthetically and show you what I'm saying is basically the problem here, right? Okay, so let's say I want to call truncate real 32 to int 32 and I pass it 0.5, right? Or let's say I pass it 0.75, right? Okay, so int 32 equals truncated, and there we go. And I could say float something here. I'm just going to set up a call to this so I can show you what I want to show you without having to deal with getting to the point in the debugger where it actually would be. So let's go ahead here and let's just step into that. You can see it happening here. There we go. And so you can see what I did, right? I passed in negative 0.75, and I ask it to truncate. Now, all of our truncations have been working properly, and the reason that they've been working properly for our purposes is because we were always working with positive numbers. And what happens in the C when I do this truncation is, you remember, and there we go. If you remember, I basically was saying, okay, you know, I've got this sort of thing here, and I want to find out where we are on the tile map, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to find out where we are on the tile map, so like we're here or something. We want to truncate it down to 0, so we just do the truncation, and we just get what's left. But if you think about what will happen, right, when we are here, does that make sense? This is negative 1, we want it to truncate down to negative 1, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to see where we still were in a tile map that imaginarily keeps going below 0. Unfortunately, what C will actually do, and you know, I don't pretend to remember why it does these things, but this is, I believe, how it's specified to work, I think, is basically it will truncate towards 0. So if you're lower on the number line than 0, I believe what happens is instead of truncating down to the next lower value, it truncates to the next value closer to 0. So basically around 0, as you go out in either direction, if this is 0, the truncation direction is actually sort of combed towards 0, right, like this. And so that's not what we wanted at all for our purposes. That's like totally not what we want. What we want is something that truncates towards towards negative infinity, right? Negative infinity is off here, off infinity. We want something that always goes downward, truncate towards negative infinity. right? Now we can do a simple hack for this if we wanted to enforce that, right? So if we have the truncate real32 to in32, we can have basically a floor function, right? Like or something. We can call this truncate real32 to in32 toward negative infinity or something. But I believe typically that floor.
So was that what I was looking for the whole time? It seems reasonable, because that's exactly the direction he goes in. But I was struggling with this when we were writing this out originally, to truncate, you know, the x and y divided by the tile width and height. I guess I must have been looking for, yeah, I mean, it says right here. I guess I was confused about whether we wanted to round towards 0 or negative infinity back when we were writing that. But it seems like, yeah, we can just do a floor. And if we go into the definition of that, it doesn't say it here, but I mean, it's safe to assume that this is going to take us towards, whoa, do not want to do that. But this is going to take us towards negative infinity, and then, you know, we won't have this issue when we go back up here. That feels really good. Look at that, we got changing tile maps here. Then we can start filling them in. We're well on our way here. That's awesome. I was really nervous, honestly, about starting to do programming on stream, because it's hard enough, you know, to program, and it's hard enough to try and communicate what the hell it is going on as you're doing it. I do feel like it's working different parts of my brain, having to kind of talk through this stuff. I'm so used to just like muscle memory and just kind of letting my brain kind of guide me and not thinking about it. I know J-Blow has talked about some aspects of this, because he's gotten all sorts of questions over the years, right? But there's one question, I was watching an interview of him, and the question was something along the lines of like, so how do you move really quickly and be a productive programmer? And he couldn't even, he can't answer that question. He can't explain it, because it's so much of it is like, you just get into the code, and then there's something kind of moving through you. Your brain is kind of moving through it and just trying to track the problem as best as you can. And it can be hard to even articulate with words what is going on, but you just go. You kind of just chase the problem, and you get to a solution over time. It's just a weird thing. But I'm enjoying myself, so we're paying dividends to the to the act of programming out stream and having to talk through this stuff aloud and make mistakes, because I make mistakes all the time, but certainly it's easier to make mistakes when you're, trying to stream a thing. So
it has that definition. Let me look up exactly if floor is. I don't want to use. That's not what we want. That's funny. I just want to make sure I'm not going to use a wrong term here for the name. I want to know that floor is, yeah. So you can see floor and ceiling typically have the definition of always doing the thing that we want, which is no matter what side of 0 they're on, they always go sort of off towards negative infinity or positive infinity. Ceiling will go this way. Ceiling will go this way, and floor will go this way, and that's what we actually want. So what I really wanted instead of truncation is actually flooring, if that makes sense. And so for most of the places that we would use truncate, I actually want to use floor, if that makes sense, right? I don't know. Hopefully that was pretty clear why that.
So I actually didn't even bother to check if there are other places where we're using trunk, and it looks like we aren't. So I think we can just let him keep cruising here.
That's actually the case. So if I look at this, when we're doing these, I really want floor in these two things, not truncate, because truncate has a particular meaning that in C that we don't actually want to have happen. So if I do floor here, I mean, obviously I can do this a little bit uglier myself. I could say, all right, doing this, or I could do something ridiculous that would work for our purposes, for example, which would be something, like that, right, where I basically just force the value for the ranges that we care about to be positive, right? But usually the processor has a way of us being able to do this directly, and you can do floor F usually, although I don't actually know. I think we would have to include math.h for that, so I don't actually know if we want to do it that way. But I'm just gonna show you what the difference here ends up being. So where's my? Oh, I deleted my test case. That was not very smart. But anyway, if we actually do that, then in theory, when we run this particular thing, we will no longer have that problem of having the negative value, which will assert. So if I walk off the edge here and then walk back on, you can see that we're back to working properly there, right? So that's all good. No worries there. But that is not a particularly useful thing to do because we don't really want to use math.h. So maybe what we'll do on the first thing on Monday is start talking about how to implement these math functions. Right, so we don't want to leave that in there. So let's go ahead and say that that's going to be a priority for us so we can start talking about how to implement these sorts of things directly. And then the other thing I wanted to do real quickly, because we're 10 minutes over here. Well, I guess we started a little late, but we're a good 5 minutes over. I also want to take a look at the thing that I was trying to look at originally, which was our crashing case, which we had, but I didn't get a chance to look at that. So when we walked off the side of the screen here, we were supposed to crash. We didn't crash, so I wonder if that was maybe the same bug. That could be, but it would have been nice to have that crash repro. That's a little unfortunate. But anyway, our dude now is super happy. Weird guy. He's walking around. Look at how happy he is. I don't know if you realize how happy he is because he's yellow, so he can't express himself to you in the same ways that he would if he were, say, a fully grown sprite. But it looks to me like we have successfully done what we wanted to do. It's just we have a little bit of an issue, which is that we need to be able to implement our floor function ourselves, and so that is what we'll have to do next week. But ladies and gentlemen, there's really no stopping us now. I feel like at some level you have to admit that we're kind of getting unstoppable here. We actually have a dude who can walk around through a tile map, and how far could it really be to a game? 30 hours in, and there's already a dude walking around. I don't know, slap a couple bitmaps on here. I think this could be on Steam Greenlight any day now. Any day now. Just got to have some kind of catchy name for it.
Steam Greenlight, is that even still a
and
thing?
We can also make references to some games and say we'll get mostly positive reviews, I think. All right. Well, we have our work cut out for us because we got to deal with this. I don't like including math.h here. So next week's going to be a pretty serious week, I think. We got a lot of things that we want to do, which I'm going to stick another to-do in here, which is convert to, or I should say, is this ever necessary? Do we really need these raw positions ever again? Similarly, down in here, player state should be canonical position now. Oops, going under my head there. Position now. Basically, hopefully you could see from the work that we did today, it's starting to get to the point where we really should start thinking about coordinate systems, because now we actually have an idea of what our coordinate system is. We've got a tile map x and y, we've got a tile x and y, and we've got a floating point offset inside there. This is kind of an interesting thing that gives us all of the information we needed to actually make things work. Is this a good coordinate system? What do coordinate systems mean in general? That sort of stuff. Maybe that's what we need to start working on next week, is start to clean these things up. We also haven't talked about vectors yet. Maybe we should start representing these x and y's as bundles, because we're always x, y, x, y, x, y. Should we start to think about that? We've got a lot of stuff to think about next week, and we're really starting to come together here. So I think that's very promising, but we have a lot of work to do, and of course we have to implement a floor. So I think to start representing these x and y's as bundles, because we're always x, y, x, y, x, y. Should we start to think about that? We've got a lot of stuff to think about next week. And
player state should be canonical position now. Player, wait, is that a note? No, that's a to-do. Player state should be canonical now. And yeah. Good stuff. Why is my state way down here? No. But I do have these structs declared here, which just for my own self, I'm gonna move those out and up to where all these other structs are. It really doesn't feel like it matters all that much. Same thing with the tile map and the world, all this stuff. Just try and keep all the structs together. It really doesn't feel like it matters anymore when you have this much code this big in your face. These codes are all over my face.
We're really starting to come together here, so I think that's very promising, but we have a lot of work to do, and of course we have to implement a floor function. So good shape, ladies and gentlemen. This was a good week. I'm feeling positive about this week, but before I feel any more positive about this week, I think we need to go to the Q&A. So I'm going to start the Q&A now. Please put Q: before your questions and keep them to code we have done today or in a previous day. Save questions about what we're going to do in the future or how to get into the game industry, all that sort of stuff, for the pre-stream. If you want to ask those questions, you can ask those questions, but just not now. You have to come back to a future Handmade Hero, come before the stream begins and ask those questions. Basically, I start the stream when whatever the time is that's announced, the stream starts at 10 a.m. or whatever. Come 15 minutes before that. I'm usually on the stream. That is a good time to ask those questions. Today we answered a bunch of very important questions about Japanese food, for example, and we could do similar for your questions tomorrow.
As much as I'd like to sit and hang around for the rest of the Q&A, I'll probably only have a couple minutes here, and then I gotta go. Got other things to do. But pretty happy with leaving off on the end of another day and having the tile map sort of scrolling with the camera and everything to where the player is. Feels really good. Pretty happy about that. And so yeah, I'll jot down whatever I find interesting based on what he has to say. He also has to make that disclaimer every time he goes into the Q&A, just because people will come in during the Q&A, and he wants it to be centered around the topic of the day, building a tile map, dealing with coordinates and these sorts of things. But then people will ask him, like, what color is your underwear or something like that. So yeah, we've got a room now. We have multiple rooms, multiple. And then of course, we'll work on sparseness, and like he said, he hinted at vectors there again, and I'm looking forward to that again, because I just think it's going to be really neat to work with Odin array programming. It makes things like swizzling and all this other stuff, vector operations, just really straightforward, and this can be a ton of fun. Get a swig in.
Okay. Running out. Running on empty here, people.
Me too.
Let's put that down there. Can you talk about the inline keyword? Do you apply any strategies to make sure the compiler doesn't ignore the request? So not really. I mean, typically, we're not really at the stage where we're doing any kind of performance work. So when I put inline on these things, honestly, that inline is more for me than it is for the compiler at this point. When I'm putting inline in these things, that's me telling my future self that probably these things might be inlines, but it really has nothing to do with the performance. It may be that this function shouldn't be inlined, it should be out of line. So I'm not really at all trying to suggest that these are functions that should or should not be inlined when we actually go to do performance tuning. Those are actually me saying, hey, Casey, this might be something that might need to be inlined when we're way down the road. It's just a habit of me marking it. So yeah, so at this point, no. There's no, inline is really just a marker for me. It has nothing to do with the performance. When we get to performance tuning, we'll talk more about that and looking at inline functions. So don't worry too much about that at this point in the game.
So Zig has function inlining. I never really got to a point with it where I understood whether or not it was helpful. I just tried to inline functions in Zig whenever I saw him doing the same thing. But in Odin, I think if there's any sort of inlining, based on my very rudimentary understanding of what inlining is, Odin takes care of that for you, I guess. I'd have to look more into that. So maybe that's like a little bit of homework for myself to dig into. I'm sure there's been conversations about it on the Odin Discord, but I don't even know what swizzling is, but it sounds great. It is great. So, when you're doing vector operations, sometimes you want to get at like one dimension of the vector, or one plane, I guess would be a way to put it. So like, let's say we had our vector class, which we've yet to, formally define and start doing things with. But this is exactly what it'll look like when we have a, three-dimensional vector, and then same thing for a two-dimensional vector. We're getting just an array of F32s, two F32s defines a vector 2, right? Same thing with vector 3, and then vector 4. Why not? And then, whoa, not F42. That was bad. And so let's say we had a vector 3, right? But we want a vector 2 out of it. Or let's say we just wanted to get the elements into a new vector 3 that looks slightly different. And this is what's, I'm kind of killing the suspense a little bit here for myself and getting to actually work with this part of the language. But, let's say I had my vector 3. We'll just start off with, an array or a vector, 3-element wide vector with 1, 2, and 3 in it. And whoops, let's just call it my vec, or my v3. We'll say that's that. And then let's say we wanted to get a vector 2 out of it, but we only wanted the x and y. We could call my v3.xy. And you notice the compiler is not complaining about that. Or maybe it is. Oh, it's because I'm not using it. I guess I could just print it out. Format.print. Format. My v2. Whoops, not mean to do that. How could this happen? Okay, so you can see there, we got the first and second elements out of the vector 3, and we printed them out. So that is what the act of swizzling is, to my understanding. It's still a relatively new thing that I'm, starting to get a decent understanding of. It's a new thing to me. But like, let's say I didn't want X and Y out of vector 3. I wanted X and X, right? I wanted a 2-element wide or even a 3-element wide. I think this would work too. So I just want an array of X's, just this X value, but 3 times. So this is going to be a vector 3 now. And I shouldn't have removed that print statement, but I think you get the idea. When we print this out, 9uv3, now we just have a vector of 1s. So swizzling is this idea, this notion that I want some aspect of some vector or list of vectors, as the case may be, a vector of vectors, if you will, and I want to calculate new values, transformations off of that original vector. It could be for translation, it could be for rotation, all these other things. And swizzling is just super easy in Odin. It's built into the language. I don't have to go and start defining a bunch of crap, right, to be able to a bunch of boilerplate vector code to be able to start doing this. I could also do, I don't have to refer to the X value as X. I could also, let's say this was a color and I wanted it to be a vector 4 and I wanted it to have, some alpha value, call it 0.5. And I wanted to get just the RGB out of that color that has alpha in it. I could actually do this and get the RGB. Of course, I'd have to call this my color, but I think you get the idea. The swizzling, this is the act of swizzling the original vector to get at the dimensions of it that you care about to do some kind of operation, right? And that's, my layman's rudimentary, probably poorly articulated understanding, but I think I got the gist of it. And you can see how easy it was to just start doing that. I'm really excited about it and using it to actually start doing some stuff with Handmade Hero. Most of the times, inlining makes programs slower, so you really need to benchmark it before doing it. Yeah, I mean, I never got to a point with Zig where I was able to actually start testing any of that stuff before I moved on to Odin, but manual inlining. So, there's manually inlining a procedure or a function, which you can do in Zig. Odin says, don't even bother. We're not going to give you that capability. Let the compiler inline things for you where necessary. You don't get the option of even making that choice, which is just it's a different choice. And I don't know if it's better or worse. Honestly, I'm still kind of new to that idea because writing Python and Ruby and Elixir for my whole career, JavaScript, whatever, it's not something I've ever had to contend with. So I think I've got time for one more question and then I got to go. But this has been a lot of fun.
Let's see. Are we using C or C++? I mean, like I said, please keep questions that are generally appreciated, but that is technically a question about code that we have done today or other days. We are using C++, but I typically say that we're programming in C so that people don't get too confused. I guess I should be more explicit because they get confused anyway. We are basically not using any C++ features. There's 1 or 2 features in C++ that we use. Operator overloading and function overloading are really the 2 things. So we are technically programming in C++, but we won't really be using 90% of the new features that are in C++ that aren't in C. So I try not to say that we are, I try not to say that we're using C++ too often because really anyone who's a serious C++ programmer would not call the things that we're doing in C++. We're not making inheritance hierarchies. We're not making a bunch of templates. So we're not using a bunch of the things that you typically see in C++ code. So this is mostly C code, and you could almost compile it in C, C99 or something, but there's a couple features we're using that aren't supported in C99, so technically it's C++, but it's only barely. And at the end of the show at the end of the entire game when it's all done. If we wanted to port it from C++ to C, it would be pretty trivial. Basically, it would just be us going in and undoing our operator overloading. That's it, and function overloading. That'd be it. So because we're really not going to use almost anything from C++.
So that's just him rehashing again. The kind of C++ that he's writing is primarily a C-styled C++. Zig's docs also say not to use inlining. Well, there you go. It's interesting that they, have it as a feature of the language. And I'm guessing inlining is meant as something that, the developers of the language are supposed to use themselves, and then, working on the compiler, whatever. Like, they know what they're doing when they decide to inline something, but as a rule of thumb, you shouldn't. I always just did it. I always tried to inline everything if Casey was inlining it. And I'm sure there's no one-to-one translation there with Zig. I don't know what the difference is, right, and in the details of how Zig inlines a function versus how C does it. So maybe it should be better to just stick to that convention of not inlining things in Zig. And if and when I come back to Zig, which I kind of intend to, I can show you something really quick before I end the stream here. If I go to my own GitHub, which has been renamed to keep everything consistent here with my new handle. I've reinvented myself and changed my GitHub handle to match all the channel stuff. So what I've done over here is I've made a repo that just has the platform layer that I've written with SDL and Odin, so that anybody else that wanted to play with Odin and play with SDL could actually start off from day 26, just like I did a week ago or whatever. And I want to do the same thing for Zig, but the difference is, in Zig, I didn't write the platform layer in SDL. I did it in Win32, just like Casey did. But I think I'd like to do both eventually. I'd like to have, because it would be easy enough to just rip out all the game stuff and put in the platform layer for Win32 with Zig, and then I could do the same thing for SDL. Just, maybe that'd be a fun thing to tackle on stream one of these days. And that way I'd have, a platform layer for each one that's just kind of open for whoever to take and then start running with it. Because at one point I had a whole repo. I had a Handmade Hero repo here that, let me make sure I'm actually sharing what I think I'm sharing. I am. I had a Handmade Hero repo for sharing my whole code base, like 100 days deep. And then I heard Casey say the other day on stream while I was watching the series that he doesn't want people sharing the game code. Now, that was 10 years ago when he said that. I don't know if he cares at all now, because I know there's other people that have posted the whole game code publicly, but I just want to, not step outside the rules as he's defined them here in the stream. And I want to say, I'm happy to post these platform layers out there in different languages for people to mess around with them if they are so inclined, but I don't want to post the whole thing. So I've got private repos for all this stuff, right? But I do not have public repos for all the game code. So I'd like to have both. I'd like to have the platform layer there still for people to play around with if necessary. So when I go to make that Zig platform layer, what I would do, right, is I would not have the function inlining stuff, probably. Just to keep it consistent with the rules of Zig. Back over here. It's important for comp time semantics. Interesting. I'll have to look into that more. If I get the itch to go back to Zig, which I there's a project that I was interested in maybe eventually contributing to with Zig, but it became clear to me over time that wasn't, I would have time for little else if I set out to do that and do it seriously. And I ultimately decided I didn't want to commit myself to that, especially once I started coming to grips with Odin and learning Odin a bit. So, but yeah, they're both languages that are, seem to be doing a good job of carving out a niche. Certainly seems like Zig has a bit more of a bit more hype around it at this time, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be fun to watch both ecosystems grow and see the different directions they go in. I know Odin is just about to release 1.0 probably within the next 1 year or two, right? It sounded like I heard the creator talking about it just the other day, where he's hoping they'll get to version 1 within the next year. And it does seem like Zig has a bit further to go. But either way, I'm excited for both those languages because I think what they're doing and making lower level programming more approachable in a way that I didn't get that sense of control from Rust. It felt more like Rust was controlling me, for better or worse. I'm sure that has its pros and cons, but just the way that my brain works and I like to think about things, Zig and Odin just kind of appealed a bit more. Jai is probably also in a year. Yeah, I'd like to try that out when it comes out and it's easily available. So maybe we'll do a Handmade Hero stream. I don't know. Jam D's Nuts. Yeah, that's the other channel. We don't stream that channel on Twitch. So anyway, thanks for hanging out with me, Andrew, Devil. Really appreciate you guys chiming in and helping me, figure out where I've gone wrong, when I've gone wrong, because it does happen so often. But I'll be back tomorrow, probably around this time right now, and we'll start off on day 31. Until then, have a good rest of your day.